Sarah Martinez stared at her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the woman looking back at her. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her once bright smile had faded into a thin line of exhaustion. At 32, she felt like she had aged a decade in just 3 years of motherhood. The sound of crying pierced through the thin walls of their small apartment. Again. Baby Emma was only 8 months old, but she seemed to cry more than she slept. Sarah's shoulders sagged as she trudged toward the nursery, her bare feet shuffling across the cold linoleum floor. "Shh, baby girl," she whispered, lifting Emma from her crib. The baby's cries only grew louder, and Sarah felt that familiar tightness in her chest. She bounced Emma gently, walking in circles around the tiny room filled with hand-me-down furniture and toys scattered everywhere. From the living room, she could hear her 4-year-old son Miguel arguing with the television, trying to change channels with a remote that barely worked. The breakfast dishes still sat unwashed in the sink, and laundry piled up like small mountains in every corner of their home. Sarah's husband Carlos had left for work before dawn, as he did every day, driving his delivery truck through the city streets. He wouldn't return until after dark, exhausted and ready only to collapse on their worn couch. When he did come home, he seemed to look right through her as if she had become invisible. The walls of their apartment felt like they were closing in on her. Sarah remembered the dreams she once had, finishing college, maybe becoming a teacher, traveling to places she had only seen in magazines. Now those dreams felt like they belonged to someone else entirely. Emma finally quieted down, but Sarah knew it wouldn't last long. Nothing ever lasted long anymore. Peace was temporary, sleep was a luxury, and silence was something she had almost forgotten existed. She looked out the small window at the busy street below, watching people walk by with purpose and freedom she envied. Miguel appeared in the doorway, his dark hair sticking up in every direction. "Mama, I'm hungry," he said, tugging at her faded pajama pants. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, trying to summon energy she didn't have. "Okay, baby, let's get you some cereal," she said, carrying Emma to the kitchen while Miguel followed behind. As she poured milk into a bowl with one hand and held the baby with the other, Sarah wondered when her life had become this endless cycle of feeding, cleaning and soothing with no time left for herself. The apartment felt smaller each day, and Sarah felt herself shrinking along with it. She couldn't remember the last time she had laughed, really laughed, or felt excited about anything. The woman she used to be seemed like a distant memory, buried under piles of responsibility and endless needs that were never fully met. Outside, the world continued spinning, full of possibilities and adventures she would never experience. Inside, Sarah felt trapped in a life that had become too small for the dreams she once carried. She didn't know that everything was about to change, starting with a chance encounter that would remind her who she used to be and who she could become again. The grocery store felt like a battlefield on Tuesday mornings. Sarah pushed the squeaky shopping cart through the narrow aisles while Emma fussed in the baby seat and Miguel ran ahead, touching everything he shouldn't touch. Other shoppers moved around them with obvious irritation, and Sarah felt like apologizing for simply existing. "Miguel, stay close," she called out, her voice carrying that edge of tiredness that had become her default tone. Her son was examining a display of colorful cereal boxes, completely ignoring her words. Emma began crying again, and Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment as other customers shot disapproving glances her way. She was struggling to reach a can of tomatoes on the top shelf when she heard a gentle voice behind her. "Let me help you with that." Sarah turned to see an elderly man with weathered hands and kind eyes. His skin was deeply tanned and his long gray hair was pulled back neatly. Something about his calm presence immediately put her at ease. "Thank you," she said as he easily reached the can and placed it in her cart. "I'm sorry about all the noise. My kids are having a difficult morning." The man smiled and his eyes crinkled at the corners. "Children are supposed to make noise. It means they're alive and healthy." He looked at Miguel, who had wandered back and was now hiding behind Sarah's legs, suddenly shy. "What's your name, young man?" "Miguel," the boy whispered, peeking out from behind his mother. "Miguel is a strong name. It means who is like God." The old man knelt down to Miguel's level. "I'm Joseph, but my friends call me Joe. I have grandchildren about your age." Sarah found herself relaxing for the first time in weeks. There was something calming about this stranger's presence, like standing in the shade of a large tree on a hot day. "I'm Sarah," she said, "and this is Emma." She gestured to the baby who had stopped crying and was staring at Joe with curious eyes. "Beautiful children," Joe said, standing up slowly. "You're doing a good job, Sarah. I can see it in how they look at you." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. When was the last time someone had told her she was doing a good job? "Some days I'm not so sure," she admitted, surprised by her own honesty. Joe nodded knowingly. "My wife used to say that the hardest job in the world doesn't come with a manual. But you have something special, Sarah. I can sense it." He paused, studying her face. "You have the spirit of someone who is meant for more than what you're living right now." The words hit Sarah like a gentle slap. How could this stranger see something in her that she had forgotten existed? "I used to think so," she said quietly. "But that feels like a long time ago." "Time is a funny thing," Joe said. "Sometimes we think we've lost years, but really we've just been preparing for what comes next." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small piece of turquoise stone, smooth and worn from handling. "This belonged to my grandmother. She always said it brought clarity to those who needed to see their path clearly." He pressed the stone into Sarah's palm. It felt warm against her skin, as if it had been sitting in sunlight. "I don't need this anymore, but I think you might." "I can't take this," Sarah protested. "It's too precious." "Precious things are meant to be shared," Joe said. "Besides, I have a feeling our paths crossed today for a reason." He looked at Miguel, who was still watching everything with wide eyes. "Take care of your mama, Miguel. She's special." Before Sarah could respond, Joe had disappeared around the corner, leaving her standing in the canned goods aisle with a warm stone in her hand and a strange feeling in her chest that something important had just happened. For the first time in months, she felt a tiny spark of hope, though she couldn't explain why. That night, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the strange encounter at the grocery store. She held the turquoise stone Joe had given her, rolling it between her fingers as she sat on her bed after finally getting both children to sleep. The stone seemed to pulse with warmth, and every time she touched it, she felt a little less heavy inside. Carlos came home late again, mumbling a quick hello before collapsing on the couch with his phone. Sarah wanted to tell him about meeting Joe, about the stone, about the way a complete stranger had made her feel seen for the first time in years. But Carlos was already scrolling through his phone, building an invisible wall between them. The next morning brought the usual chaos of breakfast, diaper changes, and Miguel's endless questions about everything he saw. But something felt different. Sarah found herself humming while she made coffee, something she hadn't done in months. When Emma started fussing instead of feeling frustrated, Sarah picked her up and danced slowly around the kitchen. "Mama's dancing," Miguel giggled, clapping his hands. For a moment, Sarah saw herself through her son's eyes and remembered that she used to love dancing. She used to love many things before they got buried under the weight of daily survival. Later that afternoon, while the children napped, Sarah found herself walking to the small park near their apartment building. She had passed it hundreds of times but never actually sat down and enjoyed it. Today she settled on a bench under an old oak tree and pulled out the turquoise stone. "You look peaceful," came a familiar voice. Sarah looked up to see Joe approaching, carrying a small bag of birdseed. He scattered some on the ground and pigeons immediately flocked to the spot. "Joe, what are you doing here?" Sarah asked, genuinely happy to see him again. "I come here every Tuesday to feed the birds," he said, settling beside her on the bench. "My grandmother taught me that taking care of small creatures helps heal the soul." "What brings you here?" Sarah held up the stone. "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about being meant for more." She paused, watching the birds peck at the seeds. "I used to have dreams, big dreams. I wanted to help children learn, maybe open my own daycare center someday. But then life happened and those dreams started feeling impossible." Joe nodded thoughtfully. "Dreams don't disappear, Sarah. They just go into hiding sometimes, waiting for the right moment to come back." He pointed to a small bird that had been pushed away from the food by larger pigeons. "See that little sparrow? She's not as big or loud as the others, but watch what she does." Sarah watched as the sparrow waited patiently on the edge of the group. When the larger birds moved on, the sparrow hopped forward and found plenty of food left behind. "She's smart," Sarah observed. "Exactly. She didn't try to fight the big birds. She used patience and timing." Joe smiled. "Sometimes the best strategy isn't to force our way through life, but to wait for the right moment and then act with purpose." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the birds. Sarah felt something loosening in her chest like a knot that had been tied too tight for too long. "How do you know when it's the right moment?" she asked. "You'll know," Joe said simply. "Your heart will tell you. But first you have to start listening to it again." He stood up, brushing birdseed from his hands. "I have something to show you tomorrow if you're interested. There's a place not far from here that might help you remember who you really are." Sarah felt a flutter of nervousness mixed with excitement. "What kind of place?" Joe's eyes twinkled mysteriously. "A place where people go to find what they've lost. Meet me here at the same time tomorrow if you can manage it." As he walked away, Sarah clutched the stone tighter and felt something she hadn't experienced in years: curiosity about what tomorrow might bring. For the first time since becoming a mother, she was looking forward to something that was just for her. Sarah spent the entire night wondering about Joe's mysterious invitation. She arranged for her neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, to watch the children for an hour, something she rarely did because she felt guilty asking for help. But the curiosity was too strong to ignore. When she met Joe at the park the next day, he led her down a path she had never noticed before, winding behind the trees and away from the busy street. They walked in comfortable silence until they reached a small community garden hidden in what used to be an empty lot. "This is it," Joe said, gesturing toward rows of vegetables, flowers, and herbs growing in neat plots. "This is where people come to remember." Sarah looked around in amazement. She had lived in this neighborhood for 3 years and never knew this place existed. A few people were tending their garden plots, and she could hear quiet conversations and gentle laughter. The air smelled like earth and growing things, completely different from the exhaust and noise of the street. "It's beautiful," Sarah whispered. "Who takes care of all this?" "We all do," said a woman approaching them with dirt on her hands and a smile on her face. She was about Sarah's age, with curly red hair tied back with a colorful bandana. "I'm Maria. Joe told me you might be interested in joining us." "I don't know anything about gardening," Sarah said quickly. "I can barely keep my houseplants alive." Maria laughed warmly. "That's what I said when I first came here 2 years ago. I was going through a difficult divorce and felt like I was drowning in my own life. Joe suggested I try planting something." She gestured to a thriving plot filled with tomatoes, peppers, and herbs. "Now look at this. I grew all of this with my own hands." Joe walked over to an empty plot near the back corner. "This one just became available," he said to Sarah. "The woman who had it moved to another state, but she left behind some tools and said she hoped someone would continue what she started." Sarah knelt down and touched the rich, dark soil. It felt cool and full of possibilities. "I've never done anything like this before," she said. But something inside her was already imagining what could grow here. "That's the point," Joe said gently. "Sometimes we need to do something completely new to remember who we really are." He handed her a small packet of seeds. "Sunflowers. They're easy to grow and always reach toward the light no matter what obstacles they face." Over the next hour, Maria showed Sarah the basics of preparing soil, planting seeds, and caring for growing things. Other gardeners stopped by to introduce themselves and share advice. Sarah met Tom, a retired teacher who grew the most amazing vegetables she had ever seen. She met Elena, a young mother like herself who brought her toddler to play in the dirt while she tended her flowers. "How do you find time for this?" Sarah asked Elena, watching the woman's little boy happily making mud pies. "I make time," Elena said simply. "I realized that taking an hour for myself each week made me a better mother the other 6 days. My son loves it here too. He's learning where food comes from and getting dirty without me worrying about the mess." As Sarah planted her first sunflower seeds, something shifted inside her chest. Each tiny seed felt like a promise, a small act of faith that something beautiful could grow from almost nothing. Her hands, usually busy with diapers and dishes, were doing something creative and hopeful. "The hardest part is believing the seeds will actually grow," Maria said, watching Sarah work. "But if you're patient and keep showing up, they always surprise you." When they finished, Sarah's hands were dirty and her knees were muddy, but she felt more alive than she had in years. Joe walked her back toward the park entrance. "Same time next week?" he asked. Sarah nodded, clutching the packet that still held a few remaining seeds. "Joe, can I ask you something? Yesterday you said I was meant for more. How did you know that?" Joe paused under the shade of the oak tree. "My grandmother was Apache. She taught me to see people's spirits, not just their circumstances." He looked directly into Sarah's eyes. Your spirit is like a fire that's been covered by ashes. The ashes aren't you, Sarah. The fire underneath is who you really are. Walking home, Sarah felt the turquoise stone warm in her pocket and tiny seeds of change taking root in her heart. For the first time in years, she was excited about something that belonged entirely to her. 3 weeks later, Sarah's sunflowers had sprouted into small green shoots reaching toward the sun. Every Tuesday, she spent an hour at the community garden, and slowly something inside her began to bloom as well. She found herself singing while doing dishes and actually enjoying conversations with Miguel instead of just managing them. Carlos noticed the change but couldn't understand it. "You seem different lately," he said one evening, looking up from his phone with a puzzled expression. "More, I don't know, awake, I guess." Sarah wanted to share her excitement about the garden, about the friends she was making, about the dreams that were starting to whisper to her again. But Carlos had already returned to scrolling through social media, and the moment passed like so many others. At the garden that Tuesday, Joe wasn't there. Sarah felt disappointed until Maria explained that he was visiting his daughter in another state. "Don't worry," Maria said with a knowing smile. "Joe has a way of disappearing once he's sure you don't need him anymore." "But I do need him," Sarah protested. "He's the one who showed me this place." Elena, who was watering her tomato plants nearby, overheard their conversation. "Joe does this," she said. "He helps people find what they're looking for, then steps back so they can find their own strength. He's like a gardener for people's souls." That afternoon, while Sarah was weeding around her sunflowers, a woman approached her. She was elegantly dressed and carrying a clipboard, clearly not a gardener. "Excuse me, are you Sarah Martinez?" she asked. Sarah nodded, brushing dirt from her hands. "Can I help you? I'm Linda Chen from the Parks Department. I've been hearing wonderful things about this community garden, and I wanted to meet some of the people who make it special." Linda smiled warmly. "Several people mentioned you as someone who's really blossomed here, if you'll pardon the pun." "I don't know about that," Sarah said, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "I've only been coming here for a few weeks." "Sometimes a few weeks is all it takes to see someone's true potential," Linda said. "I'm actually here because we're looking for someone to help coordinate our new children's garden program. We want to create spaces like this in schools and community centers throughout the city, teaching kids about growing food and taking care of the earth." Sarah's heart began to race. "That sounds amazing, but I'm not qualified for something like that. I don't have experience with programs or children's education." Linda laughed gently. "You're a mother who's discovered the joy of gardening and community. That's exactly what we need. The technical stuff can be taught, but the passion for helping children grow? That's something you either have or you don't." She handed Sarah her business card. "Think about it. The position would start part-time, just a few hours a week at first, but it could grow into something bigger if you're interested." After Linda left, Sarah sat on a bench beside her sunflower plot, which was now taller than her knees. She thought about the dreams she used to have about working with children, about making a difference in young lives. This opportunity felt like those dreams were calling to her from across the years. Maria came over and sat beside her. That looked like an interesting conversation. Sarah told her about the job offer, and Maria's face lit up. "Sarah, this is incredible. This is exactly what you've been preparing for, even if you didn't know it. But what about my kids? Emma is still so young, and Miguel needs me." "Of course they need you," Maria agreed. "But they also need to see you as a whole person, not just their mother. Children learn more from what we do than what we say. If you show them that dreams are worth pursuing, they'll learn to chase their own." That evening, Sarah called her sister Anna, who lived across town. They hadn't talked much since Sarah's children were born, both of them too busy with their own lives. But tonight, Sarah needed to talk to someone who had known her before motherhood changed everything. "Anna, do you remember when I used to talk about opening a children's center someday?" Sarah asked. "Of course I remember. You used to draw pictures of it and plan out every detail." "Why?" Sarah told her sister about the garden, about Joe, and about the unexpected job opportunity. Anna was quiet for a long moment. "Sarah, I've been worried about you for the past few years. You seemed to disappear into your role as a mother and forget you were still a person with dreams and talents." "I felt like I had to choose," Sarah admitted. "Like I couldn't be a good mother and still want things for myself." "That's not true, and you know it," Anna said firmly. "The best mothers I know are women who didn't lose themselves in motherhood, but found ways to grow alongside their children. This sounds like your chance to do exactly that." After hanging up, Sarah went outside and looked up at the stars. She pulled the turquoise stone from her pocket and held it up to catch the moonlight. Somewhere out there, Joe was probably looking at the same stars, knowing that the seeds he had planted in her life were finally beginning to bloom. Sarah called Linda Chen the next morning before she could lose her courage. Her hands trembled as she dialed the number. But when Linda's warm voice answered, Sarah felt a surge of determination she hadn't experienced in years. "I've been thinking about the children's garden program," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'd like to learn more about it." "Wonderful. Can you come in for an interview next week? I'd love to show you what we're envisioning and hear your ideas." After hanging up, Sarah realized she would need help with the children during the interview. She had never left Emma with anyone except Mrs. Rodriguez for short periods, and the thought of being away for several hours made her anxious. But something Joe had said echoed in her mind about waiting for the right moment and then acting with purpose. She called her sister Anna. "I need to ask you a huge favor," Sarah began, and told her about the interview. "I'll take the day off work," Anna said without hesitation. "Sarah, I'm so proud of you for doing this." The week passed slowly, filled with Sarah's nervous excitement and second-guessing. Carlos seemed confused by her mood swings and increasing distraction. When she finally told him about the job opportunity, his reaction wasn't what she expected. "A job?" he said, frowning. "But what about the kids? Emma's still a baby and Miguel needs constant attention. How are you going to work when you can barely manage things at home?" Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. She had hoped Carlos would be excited for her, or at least supportive. "It's only part-time at first. Anna said she could help with childcare, and maybe we could find a good daycare for Emma." "Daycare costs money, Sarah. And what if this job doesn't work out? Then we've disrupted everything for nothing." Carlos shook his head. "I think you should focus on our family right now. Maybe in a few years when the kids are older." That night, Sarah lay awake staring at the ceiling while Carlos slept beside her. She understood his concerns, but his lack of faith in her abilities stung more than she had expected. For so long she had seen herself through his eyes, as someone barely managing to keep up with daily life. But the past month at the garden had shown her a different version of herself, one that was capable and growing. The morning of her interview, Sarah woke up early and spent extra time getting ready. She wore her best dress, the one she used to wear to job interviews before Miguel was born. Looking in the mirror, she saw glimpses of the confident woman she used to be. Anna arrived with bags of activities to keep the children entertained. "You look beautiful," she said, giving Sarah an encouraging hug. "Remember, they asked you for this interview. They already see something special in you." The Parks Department office was bustling with activity, and Linda greeted Sarah with genuine warmth. She introduced her to several staff members and showed her pictures of successful garden programs in other cities. "We want to start with 3 schools in underserved neighborhoods," Linda explained. "The goal is to teach children where food comes from, give them hands-on science experience, and create community gathering spaces where families can learn together." Sarah felt her excitement building as Linda described the program. This was exactly the kind of work she had always dreamed of doing, combining education, community service, and helping children discover the magic of growing things. "Tell me about your vision for this program," Linda said, settling back in her chair. "What would you want to accomplish?" For the next hour, Sarah found herself talking passionately about ideas she didn't even know she had. She spoke about teaching children that they could nurture life and create beauty with their own hands. She described lessons that would connect gardening to math, science, and reading. She talked about involving families so that the learning extended beyond school hours. "You clearly have a gift for this," Linda said when Sarah finished. "Your experience as a mother, combined with what you've learned at the community garden, makes you perfect for this position." "But I don't have formal training in education or program management," Sarah said, her old insecurities surfacing. "We'll provide training for the technical aspects," Linda assured her. "What we can't teach is the passion and understanding you already have. Sarah, I've interviewed 5 other candidates for this position, and none of them had the vision and heart that you've shown today." Driving home, Sarah felt like she was floating. Linda had offered her the job on the spot, starting with 10 hours a week and the possibility of expansion based on the program's success. For the first time in years, Sarah felt like she was moving towards something instead of just surviving each day. But as she pulled into her apartment complex, reality set in. She still had to convince Carlos that this was the right decision for their family. She still had to figure out childcare and logistics. Most importantly, she had to believe in herself enough to take this leap into an unknown future. 2 months later, Sarah stood in front of 30 excited third graders at Roosevelt Elementary School, watching their faces light up as they planted their first seeds in the school's brand new garden. The raised beds that had been built over the summer were filled with rich soil, and small tools hung on hooks along a painted fence that separated the garden from the playground. Remember, each seed needs water, sunlight, and patience, Sarah told the children, her voice carrying easily across the garden space. Just like people, plants need care and time to grow into what they're meant to be. Miguel, now enrolled in the school's after-school program, waved at her from across the garden where he was helping younger children with their planting. Sarah waved back, amazed at how confident and helpful her once shy son had become. The past 2 months had brought challenges she hadn't expected. Carlos had initially resisted her taking the job, worried about the changes it would bring to their routine. But when Sarah's first paycheck arrived and she was able to buy groceries without checking their bank balance first, his attitude began to shift. More importantly, when he saw how much happier and energetic she had become, he started to understand that this job was healing something in her that had been broken. Finding reliable childcare for Emma had been difficult until Maria from the community garden offered to watch her during Sarah's work hours. Maria's own children were grown, and she had fallen in love with Emma's cheerful personality. The arrangement worked perfectly, and Sarah had peace of mind knowing her daughter was with someone who truly cared for her. The children's garden program had exceeded everyone's expectations. The first 3 schools had waiting lists of families wanting to participate, and the Parks Department had approved funding for 5 more locations. Sarah found herself working more than the original 10 hours a week, but she loved every minute of it. Mrs. Martinez called out a little girl named Sophia, who was struggling to make a hole deep enough for her sunflower seed. "I can't get it right." Sarah knelt beside Sophia, remembering her own first attempts at planting. "It takes practice," she said gently. "Let me show you." Together they created the perfect hole and carefully placed the seed inside. "Will it really grow into a big flower?" Sophia asked skeptically. "If you take care of it and don't give up, it will grow taller than you are," Sarah promised. "Sunflowers are amazing because they always turn their faces toward the sun, no matter which direction it's shining from." After the children returned to their classrooms, Sarah walked through the garden, checking on the various plants that had been growing since the program started. The tomatoes were heavy with fruit, the herbs smelled wonderful when touched, and her demonstration sunflowers towered over everything else, their bright yellow faces following the afternoon sun. She pulled out her phone to take pictures for the program's newsletter and noticed a text message from an unknown number. Opening it, she smiled when she saw it was from Joe. "Heard about your success with the children's gardens. Your grandmother would be proud. The sunflowers look beautiful." Sarah looked around, wondering if Joe was somewhere nearby watching, but she didn't see him anywhere. She texted back, "Thank you for everything. The seeds you planted in me are still growing." His response came quickly. "Seeds were already inside you, Sarah. I just helped you remember where to plant them." That evening, Sarah arrived home to find Carlos in the kitchen attempting to cook dinner while Emma played in her high chair and Miguel did homework at the table. The scene was chaotic but happy, so different from the tense silence that used to fill their home. "How did the new school go today?" Carlos asked, looking up from a pot that was threatening to boil over. "Amazing. The kids were so excited and 3 teachers asked about starting classroom herb gardens." Sarah moved to help with dinner, but Carlos waved her away. "I've got this," he said with a smile. "You've been taking care of everyone for years. Let me take care of you for once." After dinner, Sarah tucked Miguel into bed and sat with him as he told her about his day. "Mama," he said sleepily, "I'm proud of you for teaching kids about gardens." "Thank you, baby. I'm proud of you too for being so helpful and brave. Are you happy now?" Miguel asked, his dark eyes serious. Sarah considered the question. She thought about the exhausted, defeated woman she had been just a few months ago, barely able to get through each day. She thought about Joe and the turquoise stone that still sat on her nightstand. She thought about the community garden where her first sunflowers had taught her that growth was possible, even when you felt buried. "Yes," she said, kissing Miguel's forehead. I'm happy. And I'm grateful for everything that brought me to where I am now, even the hard parts. Later that night, Sarah stood in her small backyard under the stars, holding the turquoise stone Joe had given her. Tomorrow, she would start planning the winter curriculum for the children's programs. Next month, she would begin the training to become a certified master gardener. And someday, she might even pursue that college degree she had abandoned years ago. The woman who had felt trapped and invisible had learned that freedom wasn't about escaping her responsibilities, but about growing large enough to hold both her dreams and her love for her family. Like the sunflowers she taught children to grow, she had learned to turn her face toward the light, no matter which direction it was shining from. In the distance, she could almost hear Joe's gentle laughter carried on the evening breeze, and she knew that somewhere, an old Apache man was smiling at the garden that had bloomed from a single moment of kindness in a grocery store aisle.